So we were talking about how science affected our understanding of sexuality, and a new scientific advance actually led to another thing that affects sexuality. We're going to find out that birth control is something that's always been an issue. It can change the course of our life if we get pregnant. So in 1843, vulcanization led to a new kind of condom. So actually the forerunners of the Goodyear company was actually responsible for making the first rubber condom. So there were condoms in the past, but they were made out of animal skins or fish gut. So having a rubber condom was a very big advance. And the first condom supposedly had the Queen on there. And I'm sure there's many condoms with Trump on there and Obama. So it doesn't seem that strange to me at this time that the leader of the country would be a condom. But I feel like the spirit of the leader on the condom back then was a little bit different than what it would be now. Okay. So now we're going to go on to the Victorian era, and we're going to find out that this is when actual scientific study into the area of sexuality began. I think a lot of you are familiar with Sigmund Freud. This is the time period that he grew up in. So this is when Freud postulated his theory. We'll find out that von Krafft-Ebing started in this. So during this Victorian era, maybe it was the new knowledge of how conception actually works, because it happened right there, that it inspired kind of a change in feelings about sexuality. So the women, so this is a very weird time period. I'm going to call this the most hypocritical time period that they had, that I've seen in all of history, is you weren't allowed to talk about sex, and women were thought not to like sex. So for whatever reason, maybe the Queen's presentation as a leader that she led, but like women were thought to not have a sex drive. And so if you looked at Freud's theory, he says that, you know, women who had like a high sex drive, there was something wrong with them. Von Krafft-Ebing, which was the forerunner of sexual research, also believed that. So prostitution, if you look at the percentage of prostitutes per population, it was actually larger in the Victorian age than what it is now. And one of the reasons is they thought that they were doing their wives a service by going to a prostitute, because women don't like to have sex. So I'm going to go have sex with a prostitute so that I don't subject my wife to my carnal instincts. That's interesting, right? And I've said that, like, why do we consider prostitutes lower level when you think about it? They do such a service in the community, and they have the potential for good, so on and so forth. But what happened is we've got the new condoms, but still sexually transmitted diseases were running rampant. And this is kind of before we understood how to cure syphilis. So syphilis is a sexually transmitted disease that can actually affect your brain and lead to blindness. It can lead to dementia. Also, gonorrhea was running around. So they had these things called virgin brothels as a way to try to stop the spread of the sexually transmitted diseases, where they would find young girls and they would bring them to a brothel, and then supposedly that young girl would be the property kind of the man. But they tried to scam, and they would just fake the women's virginity. Back in these times, they believed that masturbation would lead to all kinds of problems. And let me tell you why they kind of believed this. Well, first of all, in the Bible, there's stories about Onan, and that he was supposed to impregnate his brothers I believe. I'm sorry, like I should have looked up all these facts, so I'm just pulling everything that I'm teaching you from memory. I'm just sitting here in front of the computer going on about like what I have lectured on in the past, but my memory may not be serving me exactly right on this story, but what I remember is Onan was supposed to have sex with his brother's wife because the brother had died. And instead of ejaculating inside of her, he spilled his seed on the ground, which was a big sin. And we talked about that the reason why in the past they may have seen as spilling the seed as extremely sinful, heinous, against God, you're not supposed to do this, is because we didn't understand what semen was. But here's another reason why they were so against masturbation in this time period is they thought that it made you go blind. They thought that it made you mentally retarded. They thought that there was caused deformities on you. And the reason why they might have thought that is because the people who would masturbate in public that you would see masturbating may have been blind, not knowing someone's around, or it could have been that they were mentally off, mentally debilitated, so that they did not realize you don't masturbate in private, you masturbate in public. So the people that they saw masturbating, they had these difficult or different behaviors, and so they kind of thought that this behavior, that the masturbation had caused this behavior, instead of kind of like a reverse look. So there was all kinds of contraptions that were made to stop masturbation. So this one I do think is definitely for a boy. I don't think they had it. I know it has a bow on it, but that's when the penis gets erect, then it would hurt them, and that's terrible because we have natural erections during sleep. It's part of our sleep process. So this is really traumatic, covering everything, and they thought that this was helping people to be mentally healthy, keeping their eyesight. So they thought they were doing them a favor. You won't see as many female masturbation contraptions because, well, there's a few reasons. First of all is I don't think you see females masturbating as much as males. You definitely see them masturbating, but it's not as common as little boys doing it. And also, they didn't believe that women had a sex drive back then. So a woman having a sex drive, there was something abnormal about her. So you saw more of these contraptions for boys. And in the next video, we're going to see that cornflakes and the graham crackers, so the next video is actually about cornflakes, but I can also talk about the graham crackers. So many of you know about the graham crackers, like this little cookie. It looks kind of like cardboard, but they have a lot of sugar in it, so it's good. It doesn't taste like cardboard. That was actually invented by Reverend Sylvester Graham as a way to curb people from masturbating. Because originally it didn't have any sugar, and they believed that food being very bland, not having much taste, would take away your desire to masturbate. So I'm trying to think of that on a logical level. Could that be, I will say that like if food doesn't taste well, then tastes good, then you might not want as much. So you might remain a little bit more hungry. So maybe your desire would be more for the food, but then also like if the food isn't bringing you any pleasure, maybe you would turn to the sexuality for pleasure. So I'm not quite sure why they came up with that. What was the thoughts on that? And what's interesting about the Victorian age is I actually think it might have been a little bit fun to live in those times because you could just put a sign out and say you're a medical doctor. So anybody could be a medical doctor and you could come up with all this. So let's see this next video about cornflakes and Harvey Kellogg. I think it's Harvey Kellogg, sorry. Okay.